Welcome back to Lab 3B, Boolean Writable Property Sheet. In this lab, we're going to take a look at some of the details on this particular object on our wire sheet. If I right-click the global occupancy point and go to Views, you'll notice that the first view is AX Property Sheet. That's exactly where I want to go. So I can either select it here, or I can double-click the point, and it will go to the AX Property Sheet view. You'll notice that the out slot says true OK at 16. And then if I look at in 16, it says true OK. We're going to talk about these in just a few minutes. The first thing that jumps out at me when I look at this object is that it says true. And when my customer calls me up, if this was a pump or a light, they don't call me and say, "Hey Jeff, my pump is true, can you help me?" or "My pump is false." They say, "Hey, the pump is on," or "The pump is off." So what I want is the same type of language to be used when I'm looking at any point in Niagara as what we would say in the real world. And if you remember back to when we set up the schedule, we changed the true false to say occupied, unoccupied. And we did this in the facets. This Boolean writable point also has a facets property. I'll click the double chevron here, and I will change the true text to say occupied, and the false text to say unoccupied. That way it will match up with the same facets as the schedule that's feeding it. If this were a pump or a light, I'd make this say on or off. We'll get a chance to do that later. We'll be editing the facets on most every point that we bring into the station. Hit OK. And you'll notice that this point turned red, and the facets box here turned red. Anytime this happens, it means that you changed something, and you'll need to save your changes if you are happy with them. So I'm happy I've got occupied and unoccupied. It's spelled correctly. I'm going to come down here to the bottom of the property sheet and hit Save. Now that change is saved. Sometimes it doesn't reflect the changes right away. You notice the out slot still says true at 16. If I hit the refresh button down at the bottom, it will show me the new facets that I changed this to. I want to go back to the wire sheet and see if I can notice a difference there. So the way I go back to the wire sheet is my best friend over here, this little triangle, the back triangle. I'll hit the back triangle, go back to the wire sheet, and you'll notice here that this facet is now saying occupied. It's not getting that information from the link. It got the information from when I went into the property sheet and changed the facet on the global occupancy point. The facet of the schedule does not need to match the facet of the occupancy point. So this schedule could say whatever it wants in the facets for its Boolean facets, and they don't have to match up exactly over here. We can make this one say whatever we want for its Boolean true-false facets. Now I'm going to go back into the AX property sheet by double-clicking this point. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in here. If I start at the top, there's the name of my point, and I can right-click on the name of this point, and I can go to Views, Actions, and do several other things in here. I won't do anything else at this point, but I'll come back to the right-clicking on that object here in a minute. The out slot is what this object is doing right now. If you think of a Boolean object as 0 or 1, this object is now 1, so it's on. If this were a relay, it would be on. If this said unoccupied, it would be 0 or off. That's exactly what's happening with this point. And because we're working in a live station, this actually is turning on and off. It's a virtual point. It's not connected to anything in the real world, but we can actually see the changes that we make as they happen. The way that this object works is it scans all of its in slots, and it sets the out slot to the first non-null input slot that it sees. So you'll notice here input 1 is null, input 2 is null. Null is kind of code developer speak for ignore me. all the way down here until it gets to N16. N16 says occupied. The object sees input 16, and it says, okay, I've got something coming in on input 16 telling me to go occupied at 16. So we can use this to kind of figure out what's going on with the point. I'm going to go back to my wire sheet using my best friend, the back triangle here. And now I'm set up for the next lab where we're going to talk about those actions and dive a little deeper into the priority array.